with other people?
You're muted, B.
All right, today's definitely been technical issue day, so I apologize. I want to welcome everybody to our town hall today. Today we have Senator Pizzo and Senator Brandis with us, aka Bruce and Robin. So thank you for joining us. FPRAT is a group of like-minded individuals that are come together, nonpartisan, to bring people together, bring legislators, bring different organizations together to try to make some changes here in Florida as reference to justice reform. So I will go around and everybody can introduce themselves. You want to start, Allison?
Sure. Hi, I'm Allison Steiner. I am with FPRAP and I am invested in criminal justice reform because I am a social worker who works with formerly incarcerated individuals.
Thank you, Allison. Don, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Vanessa. Don Scott Jr., Southern Poverty Law Center Policy Associate, working with Carrie Boyd.
All right, Ms. Carrie, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Carrie Boyd. I am the Policy Director at the FPLC Action Fund and the Southern Poverty Law Center. I have a criminal justice background. This is personal to me, and I'm really glad to be here.
Thank you, Carrie. I don't know which one of the senators want to go first. I guess Senator Brandis.
Sure, absolutely. I'm State Senator Jeff Brandis. I chair the Senate Committee on Judiciary and have been working obviously on criminal justice reform for a number of years. Worked on juvenile civil citations, diversion on the front end, improving the prison system itself. And then this year we're really focusing on reentry and what that should look like. So we're working on a variety of different issues. Look forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Senator Pizzo.
Jason Pizzo, representing 15 cities in Miami-Dade County, honored to chair the Criminal Justice Committee in the Florida Senate, former prosecutor. So I had a day-to-day look at some of the issues and a lot of the inconsistencies and things we need to work on. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much. So we will just go ahead and dive right into the questions. Allison, do you want to go ahead and ask the first one?
Sure. So either senator, this one is for you. What does criminal justice reform mean to you?
Sure, I'll take that first. I mean, to me, it means making a system that's built around best practices and focused on outcomes. To me, that's really what the criminal justice system should be. It should not be strictly about punishment. It should be recognizing that there's a rehabilitation portion to it too. But ultimately, what we want is better outcomes for everybody involved. Unfortunately, the system that we've built isn't really focused on the outcomes. It's really focused on the punishment piece. And so, we really have been pushing the legislature to look at best practices and to identify those from around the country, bring those into Florida, and to begin to advocate amongst our colleagues for them to take a closer look at the overall system, which is in desperate need of overhaul. It really needs to be rethought in a lot of ways and really focused on making sure that we're getting better outcomes and using the data and the evidence to support what we do. And we don't do a lot of that.
So we're very lucky to have Senator Brandis emotionally, academically invested in this and engaged in this topic. That's not from, the few of us who come from some sort of law enforcement or prosecutorial or public defense background. So for him to be engaged is uniquely special. And he and I have very early on when I started in the Senate, he's been around for a long time. We just flirted and threw around the idea sort of out loud about shifting from punishment, which, let's be honest, the overwhelming majority of cases are not going to result in a disposition that's a life sentence. So these people are going to get out at some point, right? But shifting it from punishment to public safety. When you say public safety, everybody can get involved. Everybody has an interest in it. Everybody, should feel some participation and welcome to participate in it. And even with our colleagues who are like, all right, well, those criminal justice committee and that stuff, that's like for the people that, know it or want to be on it, and we'll handle the banking, insurance, agriculture, and all the other stuff, their own professions. But when you make it and you shift the conversation of public safety, it casts a much larger web.
Can I ask a question real quick, Senator Brandis? You mentioned outcomes. What do you mean by outcomes? If you could expound on that a little
Sure.
more.
I mean, what's going to reduce recidivism? What's going to end up for a better outcome for both the state and the individual? To me, that's ultimately what we want. What's going to ensure that they don't commit new crimes when they come out? For example, we know that if an incarcerated person has strong family relationships and has a job when they come out, then they're much more likely to succeed. If they're literate, they're much more likely to succeed. So let's focus on the things that increase somebody's likelihood to stay connected to their family. Let's focus on those things that get them literate and then able to get a job on the back end when they're out. And let's encourage that as well. And then let's not incarcerate for the periods of time beyond what's absolutely necessary, so that we can, there's much more evidence that suggests that shorter sentences in many cases are just as effective as longer sentences. And to the extent that we can look at our sentencing policy and our sentencing guidelines and make those adjustments to focus in on what is the period of time that this person should be incarcerated if they are going to be incarcerated, and what is ultimately the outcome that we want, and how do we get them better so that we truly feel like we're rehabilitating them as part of the process, and it's not just all about punishment.
Okay, thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I know that the family connection is very important. And I know that you guys have been dealing with, and I know people have reached out to you guys in reference to, the new phone system that we have now here in Florida. And then of course the mail change that's pending as far as having everything electronically. Can you guys, either one of you senators, speak to any issues with that, or how, any conversations that you may have had with DOC about it?
So both of our offices sort of engaged in it, and yet we did a few months ago. We actually did 6 facilities. I think you guys know about it. We posted like a funny joke in the cockpit, but we did 6 facilities in a weekend, 4 adult correctional institutions and 2 DJJ. And that's when the conversation started about switching over from 13.5 cents for long distance, 4 cents local, and then doing a flat rate, or 14 cents long distance, and now 13.5 cents flat rate. Except a lot of the incarcerated people inside said they loved the new system. And I just sent an email before we started tonight to Amy that we speak to on a number of issues, and told her we're going to revisit it. There were no plans. It is the contract that's in place. But we need to sort of get through a little bit, except we speak directly, to the incarcerated people. Senator Brandis has probably made 150 prison visits over the past several years. So sometimes, we kind of take their word for it. And I'm not saying that, it's not something that has to be looked at. That's number one. On the mail issue, it is an issue. It is actually a security and health safety concern. They're putting, I think it's called Suboxone. It's like a crystallized drug that goes on the back of a postage stamp, to be candid with you. And it's really prevalent, and it's an issue. And I actually even made a suggestion several months ago that perhaps, in the interim, to photocopy stuff and then not hand originals. And now I know a lot of people are pissed off about that, but I'd rather you get the mail than not get something until it waits for lab tests and swabs. I send, and I know Brandis does too, I send handwritten letters. I just sent out like 30 last week to incarcerated people. I'm curious to know if they're going to open mine and Xerox those as well, but I understand the issue. And just yesterday we followed up on somebody who's having, it's tough for us because Senator Brandis and I will be privy to information about incarcerated people. They're not saying we're violating HIPAA or anyone's violating HIPAA, but sometimes we just want a direct answer about the condition of an individual or group or situation. and things will be shared with us that necessarily wouldn't tell the public, not in a bad, nefarious, clandestine way, just they cut through the bullshit and tell us, exactly what's going on. Very often I can't relay back to a third party that called about a concern, but we get almost daily calls about people in individual facilities that are having medical issues, communication issues, hot areas in a hallway with no fan or ventilation. We deal with those all the time. But the Suboxone is a serious issue, and you don't want to you don't want to be in an infirmary, at a state prison facility. If you need medical care, you'd rather be somewhere else. And, yeah, it's not meant to be an invasion of privacy. I know that it requires and suggests you're opening up mail and you're photocopying and people can be reading it. You're absolutely right. But weighing and balancing the interests of health, safety, and welfare within the facility with promptly delivering communication, that was the balance.
And I don't know if there's a compromise or a middle ground here where we can look at certain facilities that we move this policy to and not others. Obviously, we have different levels of incarceration. It seems like, the secretary is really focused on creating an incentivized prison system where those that are doing everything we're asking to are going to get more privileges, and those who are continue to fight reform and struggle are getting less privileges. So I don't know if there's a middle ground here, and I don't know whether it's a policy that needs to be done throughout the Department of Corrections. It might be something that if you have a severe Suboxone problem, you could switch over to. I don't know what the overall temperature is for that type of policy, but to me, it seems like, look, if I was incarcerated, my son or daughter drew a picture on it with crayons and sent it to me, I don't think it would come across the same if it shows up on my tablet as it does in person. And having been a soldier who was deployed, I can tell you, like, mail lifts your spirits. And for a lot of people, this is what, gets them through the day is mail call. And so it's, I think, is there a middle ground? And that's what I continue to press the secretary on.
Yeah, those handwritten stuff. And I know that my husband, I sent him pictures and stuff like that. And, that's poems and quotes. And, he would tape them up on his, because he was usually on the bottom bunk. I would tape them up, and then that's what he would look at night. So I know that helps, and that gives him connection. So I guess we'll see what if any compromise can come next. I don't know.
If there's an inexpensive chemical or ultraviolet light or something that detects these things, that might be the remedy for it. It's something we got to explore. I don't know how it's detected outside of a chemical test.
Gotcha. Carrie, you want to ask the question?
Yes. To follow up on that, I was thinking something similar. Is there a way we can do a like they do with money? My question, I'm going down the list here, gentlemen. So the next question is, backing us up just a little bit, can you tell us about last session, your thoughts on it, what we should look for in the coming session?
Oh, they got smiles. Is that good smile?
Those were very knowing.
You want to do it or I'll do it?
Go ahead.
So, all right, I'll do it. So Senator Brandis is the chair of Judiciary. He used to be the chair of Criminal Justice Appropriations. It's Criminal and Civil Justice Appropriations. So all the money in the fiscal and, and I'm the chair of Criminal Justice. We sit on all those committees. He's the vice chair for Criminal Justice and the vice chair for Criminal Justice Appropriations, and also the chair for Judiciary. So those are the three stops that the bulk of these bills, or any bills related to criminal justice, will go through. And around towards the end of session, there was a proposed budget, and the proposed budget cut about $140 million from state correctional facilities, $11.8 million from state attorneys' offices, and 3.6 or 7 from public defenders' offices. And even though it's like a punch in the gut, or the sternum, you're supposed to kind of sit there, I guess, like typical recent decorum is just sort of nod your head, look at the sheets, and kind of just move it along. And we're like, this is crap. Now, people reflexively were like, whoa, Pizzo, you're a Democrat, and you're opposed to cutting funding to prisons. Isn't that a good thing? Okay, no. On its face, it's like, oh, well, yeah, we're reducing prison populations is far different than reducing prison budgets. Now, if we go to a facility, we were at one recently where I think there was a total of 3,300 inmates. I think it's like, we'll call it between the annex and the main portion, or whatever. And I have one teacher. Senator Brandes and I were at a place where they had like a teacher remotely for DJJ kids. My point is, those cuts are already in an environment where we have critical staffing situations. And what does that mean? If you're at critical staffing levels, that means you don't have enough people to escort people outside to go get fresh air. Because it's so critical, everybody has to stay in. It's for their own safety. Does it look cruel and unusual? Yeah. Is it necessary because there literally is not a man or a woman to spare in staff? Yeah. Do we pay markedly less for state correctional officers than we do for county officers? Than some restaurants might be paying right now? Absolutely. So you have a skeleton crew, and to cut funding additionally basically meant, all right, well, if you have one facility that can accommodate 1,500 beds, but only has 1,000, and you have another one that can accommodate 2,000, but only has 1,000, you're effectively, the idea was to close 4 facilities, and it said it in the margin in small 8-point font, and to consolidate facilities. Well, we're also mindful of the fact that there are whole towns that are like company towns almost that exist because of the Correctional Institute. And you're basically just saying by consolidating one into another, it's asking to pick your favorite child. I mean, you literally will have to close down and end people's professions in order to consolidate. Now, are the equipment operation and facility of many of these places substandard? Absolutely. And do they need to be improved? Absolutely. But surely just the idea of arbitrarily cutting closing 4 prisons and cutting $140 million wasn't good. Fast forward, we spoke out loud about it. We spoke up. We took a vote. And actually, it was one of my own Democratic caucus members that decided to vote yes for it as opposed to no. So just to tell you that, Democrats don't own the space on criminal justice reform. I mean, truly and honestly. And then it came around for budget conferences when we all get together as committee members, and a couple of reporters noticed conspicuously absent were Senator Brandes and Senator Pizzo from the Criminal Justice Committee when it came to budget conferences. And then it kind of snowballed from there. Then when the reporters followed up, they're like, what happened? And they're like, no, it's a mistake. They were supposed to be on there. It's a typo. They were left off. But then they asked the chairwoman of appropriations, why aren't Senator Brandes and Senator Pizzo here? And no one got to her to tell her that the story, I guess, had changed a little bit. And she's like, oh, we talked about it. We decided to leave them off because they don't agree with the way that the policy and the direction that we're going. So it was like, and I think we were at like a Wingstop or something, or like a Mexican restaurant when all this was going on, just like watching it unfold. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Kind of really behind the scenes. Did you want to add anything to that, Senator Brandes?
So look, this was a very difficult session. I think you have a presiding officer on both chambers that have unique opinions on the criminal justice system. I think the one thing we should all agree on is that the criminal justice system needs a plan. Today it operates really without a plan. It's like every legislative session we wake up and we discover that we have a criminal justice system. We've got to do a little bit on it. But just thinking back, like I've had, I think 6 or 7 secretaries of the Department of Corrections since I've been elected. I mean, this General Lynch is the longest serving DOC secretary that I have ever been with, because he's been there for 3 years. Everybody, I mean, I've had people that were there for 6 months and moved on. And so, I mean, we're beginning to get some consistency inside the Department of Corrections. We're getting somebody who at least identifies the major challenges that they have. Today, it's not like hiring at the Department of Corrections has gotten any better. In fact, it's gotten radically worse, and retention's gotten worse as pay increases are going up around the state, and you get you can get $150 just to walk in the door and have an interview at a local McDonald's here. So the Department of Corrections corrections officers recognize that as well, and I think that speaks to the larger challenges within the Department of Corrections. And frankly, it needs to be put on a sustainable path. It's not. It continues to deteriorate. They have since, just since we left session, they've pulled all of the work crews out of the Department of Corrections. They essentially can't run any more education programs because they don't have security forces or individuals for those education programs. And so while they may have a few resources here and there, for the most part, they are running on a skeleton crew. In fact, 60% of our facilities are currently in emergency staffing, and it's only getting worse, right? It's not getting better. And so I think you're going to see next year, they're going to have to do something. One of my favorite sayings in politics is Ben Stein from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. His dad was a guy named Herb Stein, who was Richard Nixon's head of economic advisors, and he came up with a thing called Stein's Law. And Stein's Law is pretty simple. It's things that are unsustainable tend to stop. And what you're seeing play out is a system that's unsustainable. And unfortunately, the way prison systems stop is generally very, very negative, right? It ends up in violence on somebody. It ends up in chaos, riots, or abuse. And what we've seen is a little bit of that playing out in a lot of different areas around the state. And that's really troubling. I mean, if you look at the statistics on officer and inmate violence, inmate violence, if you look at the statistics on, across the board on injuries and types of things we're looking at, we have some real problems. And it's something that we just haven't been, the legislature has to address, because the secretary literally has no more tools. He doesn't have more money. He doesn't have more staff. His facilities are getting older. They continue to deteriorate. And there isn't a long-term plan for the Department of Corrections. That being said, there's multiple other areas we could focus on. For example, we can look at diversion on the front end. We can look at adjusting the criminal punishment code. We can look at changing the amount of points that it takes to get to prison. We can look at bringing back parole as a tool in Florida. We could look at elderly release as a tool in Florida, which is what other states do. We could look at conditional medical release, which is what other states do, and do it very successfully. We can utilize technology and electronic monitoring in a much more meaningful way than we currently do. Those are all the things that I think the legislature could be doing if there was some vision and if there was a desire by the presiding officers to engage in this topic. But there hasn't been, and there hasn't been for a long time. And it's something kind of presiding officers, when they get out, they're like, yeah, I should have focused more on that. But when they're in, they get caught up in everything else. And it's not the politically sexy topic, right? And especially when everybody in the system is running for something else, which is the challenge. What we're seeing more and more of is people putting politics over policy. And we need to make that shift, at least in the criminal justice system, to focus on the policy and the best practices and outcomes and what's going to get our system better. And that starts with the plan, and we don't have one.
Yeah, that definitely is true. I know that a lot of the staffing issues have affected even families when they go to visit. They're not allowed to go an outside area because there's not enough staff to monitor that area too. So I know as family members, they're suffering too. Allison, you had a question?
Yeah, obviously, like, I'm a huge criminal justice reform advocate, so my perspective on this might be a little biased. But when I hear the data about recidivism and about family support, reducing recidivism, and being literate, and having a job, reducing recidivism, it saves money, it helps people. They're just very logical interventions that in my mind could be easily implemented. And my question is really twofold. When you talk to people who don't view this as a priority, what are their responses to hearing these like very logical and obvious solutions? And why hasn't this, gotten more traction?
So the very first meeting we had this past session for criminal justice, I actually asked Senator Brandis, what do you think about, because I have like this general feeling that there's a lot of people that we work with, serve with, who don't know anything about criminal justice. And when I say criminal justice, it's like every aspect of it, from penalty and punishment to rehabilitation to deterrence to, the whole, anything having to do with the criminal court. And he's like, no, you should do it. And so, we got with the staff director and the staff, whatever, we're like, yeah, we're going to put together a 101. And I remember Lauren Jones, our staff director, she's like, well, like at what level? Like, where? I go, no. Like sixth grade, this is jail. This is a prison. This is a misdemeanor. This is a felony. This is, and there was a lot of like, oh, and apparently I'm told, rumor has it from a lot of the staff members, the legislative aides that we had, it got shared around and it got passed around for people to watch, because you get to the upper chamber of the third largest state in the country, and there's this presumption that people know about complex terms and, and ideas, and they don't. I had a very honest colleague ask me the first session that I was here 3 years ago, hey, listen, can you explain to me what affordable housing is? Now, everybody uses that on a campaign trail, right? But to actually know the 4%, on the bricks and sticks and the 9% on the dirt and all, gets a little bit more complicated. People get to this position and they're afraid to ask because they're supposed to know. And it's okay that they don't. And we'd rather just get through the uncomfortable kind of introductory session of 101 and then have conversations. And I can tell you, I was giddy about it. And I saw Senator Brandis's face at the end of that presentation. People who would normally not be engaged in this conversation just started going. I love Senator George Gaynor from the Panhandle, but I don't know that he was really interested in anything having to do with criminal justice reform until like that first presentation. And then like he pulls me into his office. He's like, all right, I want to go over all these things that people can do towards like working to get out earlier. Okay. Now, to be clear, to be honest, to be like very, very fair, I don't know that Senator Brandis and I are. I mean, he has a lot more grace and forgiveness that I do. There are certain things to me that are not likely to reduce, someone recommitting. I have very little sympathy or sensitivity to people that harm kids or molest children. Okay. I know a lot of kids and a lot of young adults who have pulled a trigger for any number of reasons and made a split-second decision that changed the course of their life. And I almost don't sort of, cast them into damnation forever. But there are people who have continued a pattern of predatory behavior on helpless victims that is born in some sort of area, whatever, of the psyche that I don't understand. And so I want to be clear about that. Like, and I often think, because I hail from the Miami area as a prosecutor, there are people that consider that continue a pattern of like insurance fraud or other fraudulent behavior that's sophisticated and well thought out and bad, which is, again, sometimes worse than a split-second reflexive bad decision that was made that altered the course of someone's life. And so when we go back to that public safety idea, it's really about 30% of these people are going to get out every year. 30% of the population comes out. I don't want you or my kids to be a victim, either economically, either physically, property, whatever it is. I don't want you or my kids to be a victim. And we improve that and lessen the propensity for that to happen by any number of things that the rest of us seem to enjoy and take for granted. I think Senator Brandis can tell you with greater particularity. I think the average reading level right now in state facilities is what, sixth grade?
Yeah.
Sixth grade reading level. My kids are going into high school and I still have to say, use your words, right? Or look it up or read. What percentage of people upon disposition of their case had full-time jobs upon arrest in a case? Very few. Things to look forward to. And then here's the unwritten thing that is not popular to say, but for a lot of people, this is the first time they ever had a routine. It is and I think you can instill that routine and they can be successful upon reentry as returning citizens. But there are a lot of people, this is the first time. I mean, if you heard some of the stories that Senator Brandis and I hear when we visit, especially kids, like a kid sat us down, we shoot everybody else away. And Senator Brandis got and I both got really emotional. He's like, I'll be dead in a year. I got a drug habit I can't kick. I woke up a week ago. I left my group home and they got a pickup order for me. So that's why I'm in custody. But I woke up in a motel. My body was all sore. I got extra track marks in my arm, and I'm seeing a couple women in the bathroom, and I was used and abused all night long. Help me. I'm going to be dead in a year. My mom's dead. My dad's gone. Help me. Now, just think of that whole cornucopia of things going on. It's a little bit of an investment. It's time, it's resources, but left alone, that kid may kill himself or somebody else. So what is your life worth? What is your neighbors and community safety worth? What's that kid's life worth?
So,
Yeah.
Senator, can I jump in real quick? I just want to, excuse me, V, please forgive me. When you talk about changing of the schedule, you said that this is the first time that these guys have a schedule or that they have to commit to, right? So if they're no longer involved in that schedule or that routine, as you call it, once they leave the facility, do you think that that's where people are getting in trouble because that structure is no longer there? And then if that's the case, how do you create that structure on the reentry side such that it starts to dwindle away over time as people gain independence?
I think the key is that you have a job or you have a skill that you can utilize on the outside, and you have a basic understanding and literacy. But that requires resources by the state to make those investments. It requires a commitment by both teachers and volunteers to meet with people. It requires a commitment by employers that are willing to hire people who are recently incarcerated. So we have the problem is we're building, there isn't a foundation really to build off of right now. We are having to kind of now pour the foundation, and then we can build the walls and put the roof on. But our foundation really is incredibly shaky. Again, as Senator Pizzo said, we have, it's not uncommon for us to go to a facility with 1,500 people and 0 or 1 teacher, and a ton of inmate idleness, and all kinds of other issues that are largely driven by inmate idleness. And so, again, that's why I said we have to focus on outcomes. If we know that a job helps, what are we doing to prepare somebody for the job? If we know that somebody gets incarcerated and they can read and they were a teacher or they did something else while they were on the outside, how do we engage them in the system and use their skills to help guide others that are incarcerated? There are plenty of people incarcerated with DUI manslaughters and other things like that. They were highly educated, that did something crazy and stupid one night and got themselves incarcerated. And so how do we recognize that within the 80,000 inmates we have people who have real talent that can be educators. We have lifers who are going to spend the rest of their life with us that we need to help find purpose, and their purpose needs to be in kind of serving their fellow inmates. So what are we doing in that regard? But it takes us creating different strategies for different folks with the same goal of better outcomes and the data that supports those better outcomes.
Yeah, that definitely is true. And to Senator Pizzo's point, was one of those people that did share that presentation. I thought that was very informative. And I learned stuff about it as well. So thank you for putting that together. I think, if you start from the bottom and kind of break things down, and not assuming that everybody understands, especially something so complex as, especially when it comes to the points, even, when I look at my husband's sentencing thing, it's like trying to figure out, okay, well, but this is this points, it gets complicated. So I appreciate that. I don't know who wants to ask the question next.
That's the Facebook question.
I want to ask a question. The question on Facebook, I looked it up. It said, what are Senator Brandis's plans after 2022? And there was a follow-up with someone said, if a woman said that if he wants me to cut his hair, I will cut his hair.
It's my summer project. Come on.
No, we're not on Facebook Live right now. So I
Yeah.
just think that she just wants to cut your hair.
Yeah.
So look, I think my passion for criminal justice will extend well beyond my legislative career. And I'm not exactly sure what path that will take. I think I've been placed in this role and given these skills and built these friendships and relationships for a reason. And it is my goal to carry that forward. And to use that to help influence the legislatures of the future. And whether it be in Florida or at a larger, even a larger scale, I think one of the reasons that education has been so successful is that there's one guy in Florida named John Curley, who is a champion of school choice. And year after year, legislative session after legislative session, he has championed more options for kids. That's basically his mantra. And I have seen Florida go from an area where education, at least at the K through 12 level, parents didn't have a lot of choice, to today where they have almost there's probably no other state in the country that gives parents as many choices with their kids' education as Florida does today. And while some people may agree with that and some people may not, the point of me telling you that is yes, that was partially the legislature. But if you had to go to the root of what was driving that, we would go back and we would see John Curley. There needs to be somebody who steps up as the John Curley of criminal justice reform in Florida. And whether that's the role I get to play or somebody that I can encourage that will play, there has to be somebody who beats the drum every year that things need to change and that brings the legislature the 3 or 4 ideas that move the needle. Football is focused, it's a game of first downs, but it's a game of getting 3 or 4 yards every down. Right. And so how do we recognize that some days we're going to catch a long pass and some years we're going to catch a long pass and we're going to get rid of PRR and we're going to allow for flexibility on mandatory minimum sentences. And some years we're just going to get 1 or 2 minor things done, but that overall we're advancing the ball. To me, that takes somebody to quarterback. And I think whatever role I play, whether it's, left tackle or right guard or defensive end, I'm going to be engaged in the process to ensure that the ball is moving forward.
He's a little too modest.
Well, we appreciate that. And we appreciate that, that you still think about, our loved ones and helping them. And, and hopefully if we have, more people behind you and moving forward, then we can keep moving. I don't know football like that, but moving the ball down, I guess, to the next yard.
Moving the chains.
Yes. Let's see, Carrie or Don, do y'all have the next question?
So here's a tough one.
Uh-oh.
What should we expect this session, other than what you've described? Talk to us about some of the dynamics, what to watch out for, what to hope for.
I think we have everyone a lot more comfortable in the Senate than the mood is in the House. There's a great sort of freedom and liberty and just effect by Senator Brandis and I just say what's on our mind, and comes from a good place. We're not malicious. We don't like to waste time. We can be very honest, sometimes brutally, and we're very fortunate that we have staff and family members, and everything sort of aligned for us to speak, a combination of brain and heart. There are people who mean well, obviously, in the House, but just can't get traction in conversations or in positions, or get close, but then give it up in exchange for something else. And it's as cliche and stereotypical as you would think and you see on TV.
So like an episode of House of Cards.
It is, but the challenge we find is that we're about to go into and here, like I like to set expectations early. I mean, I'm always trying to do that because I think it helps the overall conversation. I think probably some of the things that I really want to see done is a long-term plan put together for the Department of Corrections. I think that's doable. I think if we think about the low-hanging fruit of the criminal justice system, it's reentry. I've been focused, and Senator Pizzo has been focused on changing sentencing guidelines and other portions of the criminal justice system. But I think let's start with the easiest down that we can get, which is the reentry down, because everybody's getting out anyways. So we're not having to talk about changing sentencing laws and mandatory minimums and PRR and all that other stuff. I'm not saying we don't talk about it this session. I think you got to throw that pass every session, right? You got to keep beating the drum that it's a problem or people are going to forget that it is. So somebody's going to run those pieces of legislation and I'm going to support them. But what do I think is going to get done? I think you'll get a plan done. And two, and that'll be a long-term plan for the Department of Corrections. That will include a whole, a multi-million-dollar deep dive look into the Department of Corrections and all of the challenges that it has and how to rework the overall system. And then I think we can do some things on reentry. And beyond that, I'm not going to give you kind of false hope about the likelihood of other pieces of legislation, because I think you're in a situation where you got everybody up for reelection, reapportionment in the process, and there's not the perception in the legislature is that there's not a lot of political wins for criminal justice reform. Now, I believe that that's wrong, but I'm kind of known to be 39-1 or 39-2 sometimes. so it's I think there's plenty of space for that. 30, well, there was 37-3 sometimes too.
37-3.
Yeah. So I think, look, there's, but I want to set your expectations. I want to tell you what I think is really going to happen. I think those are two things that are likely to happen. I think the probability is less the higher we reach up the tree.
There's also sort of sometimes conflicting, overlapping, contravening forces as it relates to partisanship on a number of issues where certain parties believe they own a particular space, for a while. And this past year will call into question all of your civics class beliefs and instruction on a number of things, like to say Republicans are the free market party, and then to see, a governor, no offense to the Republican friend over here, but a governor pushing for things like big tech and privacy, and then telling cruise ships how they should operate their business. Something like what happened to the free market. But at the same time, there's a large group in my party, in the Democratic Party, that's totally against private prisons. Okay, and not knowing much about it and pleading my ignorance coming into the process, I was like, yeah, a for-profit model that has to do with incarcerating people that gets paid more for each bed that's filled. Yeah, that seems like a terrible idea. However, I want to be very clear. If Jason Pizzo should ever be sentenced to state prison in Florida, I want to go to a private facility. And we need to push back against that narrative. If your concern is the model and the ethos and the ideology behind it, okay, the same argument is made about schools and vouchers and all that stuff. However, if you're asking me where I want to go to serve a sentence, I would like to go to one of the 7 facilities that has air conditioning. None of the state prisons do. The GO and MTC, they do. They have a barber shop in every little section and every wing and I want to go there. It's cleaner and nicer. And that narrative really, I'll assume some of the blame because it mostly comes from my party. Oh, you can't take any money from them on campaign stuff, whatever. One very interesting wrinkle, and you said, what's going to move the needle? What should we expect? Senator Brandis and I actually found ourselves, and I think you guys are having Cord Bird on in July. I think I saw on July 7th, and so he was there. It was just three of us as legislators. We got called like someplace that I would typically not be, like a conservative business group. It was like AIF or something, or remember whatever, in like this hotel like meeting room, and it was like captains of industry and associations wanting to start the conversation about employment for returning citizens because of the labor market. And so the Florida Trucking Association was there, and
Contractors and builders, yeah.
The Florida Home Builders Association, like giant agency associations employing thousands of people. Now, they're not there completely for altruism. They're there because there's a labor shortage. Okay. However it happens, we say this all the time, whether we need to get our colleagues to some place because they bought into it emotionally or because of the economics of it, whatever, who cares? As long as they get there, right? That might be, pretty pressing. I've always thought that like football coaches, like with one or two felonies, make for much better character instructors than people who have never been in trouble. And yet for years, they were barred from participating in, who do you want to tell kids about cautionary tales? So that might be something that moves it as well. And groups like yours need to get bigger. Okay. If on average, each inmate has one family member, that means there's 80,000 family members out there. Okay. Those are greater margins than any of us win our races, including the gubernatorial. More people will get out in 2021 than the delta between some of the races, most of the races that are had, with the exception of the presidential in Florida.
Yeah, that's very true. We need to, get our families to speak up, and it can't just be me or Allison. Everybody needs to speak up. Either writing, your legislators, showing up at their meetings. I know I met Reps David Smith because he happened to be at a taste that I was at. So, and we had chat about criminal justice reform. I wanted to go back to, about the crisis and everything like that. And I know, Senator Brandis, one of your points at one of the committees was about that we're hitting the boiling point, and that with the staffing shortages, with the infrastructure and whatnot, what do you think that tipping point will be that we may require, or how feasible is it to have some sort of special session, to make that plan, to better the system? I mean, is that even something, or am I completely dreaming?
There won't be a special session period on criminal justice issues. Just not for a long, not unless things get catastrophic. Like when General Lynch first came to Florida, he gave all the wardens a book called The Devil's Butcher Shop, which talked about a prison riot that occurred. I think it was in it was like Nevada, or it was out west. Anyway, so New Mexico maybe. Anyway, because he was that concerned that the department was in a place where that type of activity could occur in Florida, that there was understaffed, that there was a lack of discipline within the department, and a lack of consistency within the department. And so I think he is gravely concerned about some of those activities, probably less now because he's been able to install some new leadership and cast his own vision for the department. But all the wardens got that book. And so I think, barring that, it's a real challenge to see what would move legislators to engage in some type of special session on criminal justice issues. We're trying to get them to engage in criminal justice issues in regular session without a lot of success, because many of them don't see this as a major issue that concerns their community, or because they're just focused on other things. One of the other big problems we have is a department of the Sheriff's Association, which has gotten to the point where they don't even testify in Senator Pizzo's committee or my committee anymore, because they don't want to be questioned by us on some of their policy decisions. And that's, to me, kind of highlights that the fact that they just prefer to go deal with leadership directly and kill things off versus participate actively in the debate, because they don't want to be seen as on the defensive ever. And so over and over again, they will produce documentation that says, hey, look, the 85% war system works. And if you read their documentation, it says this is the greatest thing ever. We should fully support it. But if you actually read it, what they don't tell you, if you get back to the conclusion section and read the second sentence of it, it says, actually, the data is all over the place and really largely inconclusive. But they don't want to talk about that. They would prefer that we not read even their own reports and discuss and debate them, because even their own reports don't support what they protest or pretend to advocate for. So we're really challenged because it's kind of like, what are we really fighting? Who are we really fighting when they could just go to the leadership of the House and Senate and say, kill it all? We're perfectly fine with the existing exactly the way it is. Well, look, sheriffs don't have to run prisons. They have to run jails. They're happy to poach our Department of Corrections employees and bring them down to be work for their departments, but they don't have to run prisons on a day-to-day basis. They don't have to deal with the outcomes generally until people come back into their communities and hurt people. What they should be doing is trying to help us focus on outcomes. What they should be doing is focusing on making sure that we have this limited pool of resources and that we're putting it in the best place that gets us the best outcome based on the data. And instead of fighting us, they should be working with us. But you know what? To date, and I've been in the legislature a long time, I haven't had a sheriff come to me with an idea in criminal justice reform that actually moves the needle in any way, shape, or form on sentencing, on diversion, on prison system itself, or reentry. Not one. And the association does, and individual members really don't act outside the overall association often because the association really controls the messaging, and they're so afraid of making any changes that they would just rather have no changes. And so they've not proposed one idea, and maybe Senator Pizzo has one, but has heard of one, but they have not proposed one idea to me in over a decade.
So to Senator Brandis's point, just take one of the 67 counties. Let's, I don't know, pick a small one, but we'll use a hypothetical. Let's say it's Cary Boyd County. Okay. Now in Cary Boyd County, there has been a rash of, I don't know, robberies, grand theft auto, opioid sales, something. There's been like a rash of whatever. And Senator Brandis's point is, let's say successfully arrests are made, prosecutions are had, and that group or a group of people associated with that situation is sent away. Okay. To Senator Brandis's point, if you're the sheriff there with a legacy interest, and now here's the difference, and this is completely analogous to problems we have in Miami-Dade County where I'm from, which is every from legislator on down to city official and county official has kicked the can down the road for years as it relates to, and this is going to sound strange, but like sanitary sewer and septic to sewer conversion, because it's not sexy to talk about and it's expensive. And when you're running for an office that might be 2 or 4 years with a maximum of 8 years, you don't want to be the person who's campaigning on several $1 billion worth of necessary infrastructure changes. It's not sexy to talk about poop. I get it. So I've been saying it for years until finally now it's vogue and it's cool, and I don't have pride of authorship, so I don't care who champions it. Now it's like a huge interest for the mayor and for everybody else, and everybody's on board. Great. Okay. But the sheriff that we're talking about in Cary Boyd hypothetical county, now that those people have been arrested and prosecuted and sent away, what's being done to make sure that when they get out, the same behavior doesn't repeat itself? I can assure you that if you don't increase their reading level, their job prospects, connections to the community, whatever, you've done nothing but temporarily band-aid a situation by just removing them from the environment for some period of time, and it's going to come right back again. Think about this. If I took you out of 6th grade, the end of 6th grade, middle school, and then I never let you read a book again, you never improve your lexicon, your thought process, your job training, anything, just took you out in 6th grade and just cast you out into the world, what chance do you really have? What's going to happen? And so to Senator Brandis's point, which is really true, if you want job security, don't do anything. Let them come right back and you can rearrest them later. But if you're actually concerned about public safety, you should have a tickler file of each and every single person that was ever arrested and sentenced from your county and check up on them. Hell, you should even go visit the prison once in a while and get a group together that might be coming back to your community and say, guys, is there anything that we, are you getting everything that you need? We know you're getting out. We want you to come back and we want to make sure that you have the best shot. I know you got a son who's playing football right now. You have 2 daughters that are in middle school. Is there anything that we can do? Because selfishly, sir, this is a deputy, whatever, some talking to the inmate. Sir, I want a safe community. We want a safe community. So what do we need to do to help you to make sure that we increase those chances? That's a legacy concern. That's really being interested in your community. If you don't, someone asked me one time, how do we reduce crime? Put everybody in jail. If all of us were in jail, there'd be no crime on the outside. There'd be no person on the outside, but there'd be no crime. And then slowly peel off from there. Okay. But that's the truth.
Yeah, that definitely is a good way of looking at it. I don't even know who has another question. Oh, Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you so much. So, gentlemen, Senator Pizzo, Senator Brandis, I've been taking some notes tonight. Some things that stuck out: parole, elderly release, electronic monitoring, criminal justice being politically sexy topic, criminal justice being a major issue, something on reentry. So if we're going to talk about something on reentry, I'm sure it's going to have to do with parole, elderly release, and electronic monitoring. So how do we talk about this to your friends on both sides of the party, on the other side of the aisle, to make these topics a major issue and politically sexy?
Probably by a little bit of a combination of shame and data. So
shame and data.
People have to be on board to put in the effort and the resources to get the necessary data. And sometimes to get them over the hump, sometimes it has to be a little bit of calling people out. I'm going to give you an example though. Each case, each life has to be treated individually. There is not a one size fits all. Senator Brandis and I have been in infirmaries where someone has like stage 4 cancer. And it's like, wow, and they're 75 years old, or like we saw one with like both legs amputated and an arm amputated. Like, the guy didn't pose any threat to anybody and age it. There's nobody on the outside for them. There's no family member. So if in a hypothetical, if you had a loved one who had no resources, no family members, no friends, no one willing to receive them when they got out and they were terminal, are they better off with some quality of care than being alone on the outside? We see that a lot, like too much. Maybe because they've been written off, they've been discarded, whatever, for whatever reason, the years past. That's their one issue. And each and every single time we see like an 80-year-old guy, whenever we're walking out, like last time Senator Brandis like, don't do it. I go, I can't help it. Because you see someone like sitting on the end of the bed, like Shawshank Redemption, and looking like really like, weak and feeble. And, and you got to ask, like, what are they in for? And they're like, oh, he molested 6 children. You're like, oh, like, you wanted a poster child for compassionate release, or, it's.
Yeah. So I think part of it is legislators. Look, there's a new crop of legislators every 2 years. They need an education. Most don't realize that people get out with $50 in a bus pass. Most don't realize that people only read at a 6th grade level. Many of them will go their entire legislative career, House and Senate, without visiting a prison or a juvenile justice facility in their community. And there needs to be that they need to first go. They need to see, they need to experience. Somebody's got to educate them on what to look for. Somebody's got to walk them through what's important there. And so I think that's the role that you all can play, is that direct advocacy, education, and a story. To me, it's the story of the one kid in Africa that's starving that does it for me, versus, telling me about some famine overall in Africa, right? I need to hear that one personalized story where I go deep into that. And many of you have some personal relationship or some connection with a story that matters and that can be shared with the legislator that will help move the needle for them, and get them emotionally engaged in this topic. Because oftentimes that's what will drive this through the process. That, and we have to begin to work with the leadership of the House and Senate. Like, I would love to say that this is a member driven process, and it used to be it used to be a lot more in the Senate than it is kind of today. But for the most part, leadership drives the agenda. The governor helps drive the agenda. And so they need to be engaged in this as well, because without the speaker, the Senate president, the governor, this kind of falls apart. I don't know that you're ever going to get the sheriffs. I think we've got to help post data and post better, focus on the better outcomes piece. But let's consistently meet with legislators from around the state. Let's at least educate them. Let's tell them our story. I had a mom whose son's incarcerated, PRR, and he was incarcerated at 19, 20 years old and got life. He had committed a drug crime, got a few years, got a year or 18 months. Anyway, got out, committed an armed robbery because he was still an addict, because he was able to maintain his addiction while he was incarcerated, and committed an armed robbery, got PRR life at 19. And I remember her sitting in a chair across the street, across the table from me. And I said, well, how old is your son now? And she said, he's 44. And I was 44 at the time. And I think instantly that connected with me, because listen, I was a stupid kid at 19 too. I didn't commit armed robbery, but I was a stupid kid. And I did a lot of things that I wish I could go back and undo. But that doesn't mean that I haven't changed over the course of my life. I have. And I think that we have to recognize that character isn't static and that people change. And how do we do that? We create an opportunity for second chances. We look at elder release. We look at conditional medical. We recognize that the person that committed that crime years ago is not the same person that exists today. And many other states have recognized that in parole and other opportunities for people to end incarceration early. We can do that with additional gain time. There's 1,000 different things we could do that would help the system overall. But we have to have the courage of our convictions to meet with legislators, to educate them, and to help move the needle forward. And for that, we need an overall plan.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And to you guys' point earlier, I don't know that this session coming up will necessarily be the right session for that. Although going back to your football analogy, I think we definitely need to make some trades coming election year. I don't know, 7:57. So I don't know how much time y'all have. You still have some time to hang with us? Good?
Yeah, I've got a few more minutes.
Okay. So I don't know who wants to go ahead and ask another question. Maybe not. Carrie, Allison, no?
I mean, I can ask questions that are just unscripted, if that's cool.
That's fine.
Yeah, okay. So, you talked about some of the funding and the shenanigans that went on in the last few days of session. So where are we now with the funding scheme, I guess, and the conversations and trying to prioritize some of the changes that you mentioned in the Department of Corrections? What is reasonable? What is feasible? What can advocates like in this group really be talking about that has a reasonable chance of seeing some light?
I think, and Senator Brandis and I kind of have a hunch, and I don't know if it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think we do eventually go the direction of like 5 mega prisons, and the 60 plus, 67 plus go bye-bye. A lot of them are dilapidated. The cost of repair and renovation is prohibitive. That's not where extra dollars are going to go. We went from a doom and gloom scenario of not having any money, remember, in the beginning of session because of the COVID, to all of a sudden being flush with Biden bucks. So I think we do. And if you told me that the finished product is going to be 5 larger facilities where the staff gets paid an actual wage, where there's guaranteed instruction, academic instruction, because those 5 will presumably be near or around probably major metropolitan areas. So the travel and transportation for families visiting is easier to get to. There are no flights to, some of the places where the prisons are, and all of a sudden it becomes a 6-hour drive. But if you told me that the finished product is 5 large places of new construction, air conditioning, academics, education, vocation, economies of scale, purchasing power, I mean, the whole thing, instead of an incongruent collection of 67 hodgepodge, I'd vote for it. And I think that might be where we go. And the idea of developing or building something is very appealing to leadership in both sides and in both chambers. And that's a seismic shift, and it's a big game changer. And I don't really care if we kind of be like, yeah, that's a great idea. That's a great idea, even if it was somebody else's, and go with it. And it results in a better quality of life. And just frankly, honestly, as clear and as clean, as simple as this, reduces the likelihood someone reoffends, does something else, creates a safety risk. Okay. And I don't care if that means that now people get better cable TV, internet, books, whatever. I really don't. We found ourselves visiting a couple places where their law books were 10 years old. I was like, listen, I'm going to bring some new ones. You know what I mean? The laws have changed. I know that because we changed a couple of them. But that's really sort of the position that we need to go. On an individual basis, I still get direct messages from Karen Roberts about people at Tomoka or somebody over, here, or, go check in on somebody. And we do. Okay. And that's one of the great perks that we have, is to be able to get answers on those things. But what you should expect is that, like Senator Brandis said, people are running for these positions every 2 years. And some people are running for positions after this that are maybe law enforcement related. The House Speaker may very well run for state attorney, where he's from, which means he's not probably going to be, welcoming and introducing a bunch of new criminal justice reform bills in the House this year. If that's where he's headed. So the other thing is, again, it goes back to some people just don't understand. Senator Brandis gave you the example about the PRR. We had a young woman who came to our office, freaking out on an ankle monitor. She got arrested when she was like 18, went on probation, had a history of horrible sexual abuse from an uncle, and never got treatment for it, never got therapy, never addressed the issue, and continued to hang out with the wrong guys, and got a drug problem, whatever. And then kept violating with technical violations on her probation, not substantive, not any new law charges, whatever. And she's like, screw it, I'm just going to serve out the rest of the sentence, and did 366, whatever. And then a couple years later is found huddled up in a ball wrapped around someone's drapes inside of their home that was unoccupied. That's not a call for help. I don't know what is. It's not necessarily nefarious act of, malicious intent. It was cry for help. Well, PRR, the offer was 30 years, which is the same length of time as she's lived on Earth. And that just doesn't get to the issue. She may get out one day and never have addressed the underlying issues, may become, the routine might be okay in the passage of time, but come out, violent and angry, whatever. So we intervened. It turns out Maggie from my office was the first prosecutor that gave her a couple chances on probation to try to get some help. And then she came to our office, and, we used to work there, and we're like, listen, this is not an appropriate sentence for something like this. Yes, committed a felony, burglary, unoccupied struck, we don't disagree. If it was my house, I'd freak out, to be fair. But I think she's going to serve 10 months instead of 30 years. We can't do that with each and every single case, but each and every single circuit should. You look at felony murder rule, there's over 1,000 people in for felony murder rule. Now, if I'm with you as a co-conspirator and we both have guns and we're both loaded firearms and one of us shoots, that's different than a story I read where the guy handed a set of keys to his buddies that took the car and went off and committed a burglary And while inside that place, they found a shotgun and they beat somebody with the shotgun to death. Horrible situation. But the kid who handed over the keys while sitting on the couch playing video games is a little different than I'm with you during a bank robbery where we're both armed and you knew or should have known, what could have happened. Those should be individual case bases as well. Those people are serving life. It's just whether or not we want to take the time. My last concern, honestly, is that if Senator Brandis and I were actually successful this past session in passing a number of these things, you're going to have selective prosecution and point sort of not shaving, but point augmenting. What I mean by that is if we were able to get it that you had to serve only 75% of your sentence as opposed to 85% right now, you might have some offices, Miami, not one of them, to be honest with you, because we're not punitive that way. But you might have some prosecutors who offer much higher sentences because the net effect of only serving 75, they might give 20% more of a sentence. Senator Brandis actually had a brilliant bill, which was not only to reduce the exposure on PRR, but also cap the amount of time that someone's exposed to. So you're not playing that sort of whack-a-mole game. Because if I offer somebody 10 years when I was a prosecutor and they only get to serve 85%, I know they're getting out 8.5. And so if it went down to 75%, you'd offer somebody 11.5 years to have the same net effect. And we don't want those kinds of inconsistencies. If you have a marijuana joint in Miami-Dade County, you get a slap on the wrist and press go. In Brevard County, where I'm sitting right now, it's 60 days in jail. It's inconsistent.
Go ahead, Don.
Thank you, V. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So I have a question, gentlemen, and Pizzo, Senator Pizzo, kind of just want to circle back to what you said. You were talking about 5 major prisons. I guess my question to you is, are those 5 major prisons, are they run by the state or are they run by GIA? Another part of that question is, if you divide that by 5, and I'm using the number of 80,000 incarcerated individuals, if you divide that by 5, that's 16,000, that's roughly 16,000 individuals per facility. Is it safer to run a larger facility versus a smaller facility with state funds? I know it was a hypothetical and more of a wish list, but I mean, in these new facilities, is it sustainable? Is it green energy? I just have a lot of questions, and I know I
Right.
don't want to make this.
So there's going to be, so I do have a development background, but someone smarter than me and more vested in this is going to have more vetted, I should say, through this, not vested, vetted through this, what would have a better idea. But yeah, there would be campuses. I mean, we're still talking about numbers that are smaller than a lot of university campuses, right? It's still smaller than FSU or FIU South Campus or University of Florida, certainly, and they have no problem accommodating tens of thousands of people in and around that network. But yeah, ideal if the Goldilocks is 4 or 14, I don't know. But yeah, they could be self-sustaining, they could be smart, clean energy. It's just I want to get the necessary components that are lacking now because of the inefficiency of both old physical plant and structure, as well as a horrendous non-competitive pay scale that we have right now, where we're bleeding and hemorrhaging staff members to absolutely nobody wanting to volunteer in the middle of anywhere to go be a teacher, right? But if you're in and around or near a metropolitan area, you'll have no shortage of graduate students who can do instruction as part of a credit program for school. You might have a wait list of people that want to get there and teach a subject. You can throw up solar, farms, any number of things, and they can all be like built and participated by the incarcerated people. And because we know that the family component is so integral in returning citizens and prepping them and sort of prepping them up, it's just easier to get to someplace if it's Miami, Orlando, Jacksonville, maybe Tallahassee, Tampa. It's just easier if it's in and around that area. It just is.
I think it's a great idea.
And as far as who's running it, honestly, this is what goes back to like the sort of, the narrative from my party specifically about private prisons. If you told me that, listen, I don't really need a sophisticated happiness meter to tell you that a lot of the inmates at the private places are a lot happier in the middle of the summer than ones at public places. I mean,
Okay. Senator Brandis, did you want to give a shot?
Yeah, look, I mean, what we need ultimately is a plan. Whether it's 5 facilities, it's gonna take decades to
True.
site, build, transition, downsize. You would have a number of fights among legislators who don't want prisons closing in the Panhandle because that's the major employment of that, and they don't want to lose that major employer. I mean, we're talking about, if we could wave a magic wand and redo the prison system, it would look radically different. But we're going to have to deal with the legacy system for a long time. And we're going to have to think about what are the 3 or 4 key changes we can make in order to improve that legacy system for the long haul. But again, it starts with the Department of Correction needs a long-term plan. We need to focus on the front end and the back end while they focus on the middle. We need to the legislature needs to fund the middle. If we want to talk about public safety, let's focus at where we get the best bang for our buck in public safety, right? And then let's begin to work down the list of things that have diminishing return in the public safety world. This isn't rocket science. This is legislating 101. We do this every day with the decisions we make. We seek a better return on our investment, whether it be time or financial resources or investments with our kids. Like, we're looking for a return on that investment that we make. And so the legislature needs to take that same tack that it does in all kinds of other areas of policy and put it into the prison, in the Department of Corrections and in the public safety sphere as well, and begin to work down that list. And it just hasn't done that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Guys, I got to run. But it was a pleasure spending some time with you. I really appreciate it, and look forward to working with you all in the future.
Thank you. Appreciate you joining.
You got it. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Anything else? Am I good?
Anybody have any other questions for Senator Pizzo?
I have a lot of questions, but I will save them.
Oh,
And
go
I
ahead.
appreciate-
By the way.
I appreciate his time, especially when he's on the beach. And, Senator Pizzo works really hard. He's entitled to a few hours on the beach too. So.
Yeah, well, definitely thank you for joining us, and thank you for your advocacy. I know Maggie called on behalf of my husband at one point, so it's always a pleasure working with your office, and I appreciate all your support and all your straightforward answers and helping to educate the legislators. I don't know if anybody else want to say any closing words.
Senator, I just wanted to say thank you for your time this evening. Greatly appreciate it, and I will follow up with you on that, as we say up north, on that other thing.
The thing with the guy with the thing.
That thing, yeah.
And to all those who will be watching this recording, thank you again for joining. Sorry for all the technical issues. If you want to become part of FPRAP and help with, become part of the team and get those touchdowns, please email us at fprap2021@gmail.com. All right. Good evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.